Ladies and gentlemen, the U.S. Senator for the great state of Alaska, the Honorable Lisa Murkowski.
Well, good morning. I've missed you all. I have. President Michicki, Madam Speaker, members of the House and the Senate, it is really good to be back. Thank you for welcoming me yet again to what we've always said is the annual address to the legislature, but we had a little bit of a skip last year. But thank you for what you do, the important work that you do as a legislative body for our great state. We always have to start off the speech, you know, family. Family should come first for all of us, and it certainly does for me. So I have to give you my quick update. It's going to be quick, I promise. Vern's doing well. He hasn't missed a beat. There's not a project that he can't find that he's not working on, although the price of lumber slowed him down for maybe a few months. But he's working on things and he's doing well. Our older son, Nick, is an energy lawyer, and working from home has meant basically a lot more time in Alaska hunting and fishing, so the Alaska boy's not going too far. Matt continues to operate the pasta business that his dad built 25, 30 years ago. Some of you visit him at the Saturday market, but he's telling me firsthand about what he's seeing with the price of eggs and semolina flour, and he's charging me more for my spinach raviolis. So, but I could not be prouder of my boys. Very, very proud of them. In fact, Matt is on an airplane right now with his new bride off on their honeymoon. So kind of point of mom pride that you get to send your boys off. So you have your family and you have your work family, and I know all of you count one another as part of that. And I have some of my work family with me here in the gallery. Proud to introduce you to some of them. All of them homegrown Alaskans, I'm proud to say. Caleb Freilich, back there, is a homegrown Juneau guy, my chief of staff. Next to Caleb is Annie Heffler. Annie hails from Anchorage. Jamie O'Connor is my, oh wait, Annie just got married, I'm sorry. Annie Gaiman is my legislative director, so I'm getting used to it, Annie. Next to Annie is Jamie O'Connor. Jamie is fifth generation fisherwoman from Dillingham. She's my fish gal now and doing a great job for me. Next to Jamie is Angela Ramponi. She's my healthcare advisor. She's been super busy the past couple years. She's from Soldotna. And then propped up against the wall there is Kate Williams-Stern. Kate's a Juneauite, although I consider her from across the water in Douglas, but she is my deputy chief of staff, and it's good to have her with us here today. So that's the team. Oh. But because he's sitting in the back row, because I think he wanted more leg space, is my new state director, Steve Wokkowski, who's sitting back there. Steve is also from Anchorage and a friend to many of you, so welcome to Steve. Didn't mean to forget you there, Steve. So, it's never, ever my intention to come and give you a long speech because you've got a lot of work to do. I recognize that. But after missing you from last year, I do appreciate the indulgence of an extra hour today. So I was hoping you would laugh, all right? But really, I mean, there is so much that has happened since the last time I had the privilege of this podium. In the lowest moments, we faced the darkness of January 6th, another impeachment, the chaotic and deadly withdrawal of U.S. forces and refugees from a collapsing Afghanistan in a destabilizing world. And then, in the highest moments of these past years, we've celebrated incredible achievements by young Alaskans. Emma Broyles being crowned Miss America. Whoever would have thought that Miss Alaska would become Miss America? And Olympians like Lydia Jacoby, so proud of her, hailing from Seward, representing us with grace and distinction on the world stage. So we've got a lot to be proud of. I think we recognize that. And of course, nothing has shaped or impacted our lives more than the pandemic. We've lost friends and loved ones, and we're grateful for those who've kept the toll from being even higher. And I cannot find strong enough words to thank Dr. Ann Zink, Commissioner Crum, their teams, all of the doctors, nurses, health aides, support staff, janitors, everyone who has provided care while saving our healthcare system from collapse. We owe them a debt of gratitude and thanks. And I also recognize and thank our essential workers, all those Alaskans who kept our grocery stores open, our gas stations, schools, so many necessary places open. So Senator Sullivan, Congressman Young, and I have been busy. We've been doing everything that we can to help Alaska weather this storm, and that includes several major relief bills that have provided unprecedented federal support and perhaps some of the most important casework that my team has ever taken on. And we acknowledge none of this has been perfect. The government never is, particularly in a crisis. But the assistance that we brought home has made a difference, including for your state budget. These past 2 years have been hard. I think we all recognize that. But as I stand here today, I'm optimistic. I believe Alaska is well positioned for a new era of opportunity, of growth and prosperity, thanks in part to many of the actions that we've taken in Congress. At the end of 2020, I helped what we called the 908 agreement. A lot of people don't recognize that, but it was really the last bipartisan COVID package that we took on. Things had not been going well, and that's probably an understatement to say it that well. There was more need for relief at the time, but the fact of the matter is that leadership from both sides of the aisle, we're just not talking to one another. They're basically, we're just going to wait until we get on the other side of this next year. And there was a small group of us that gathered together. I invited them over to my house for dinner one night, and we were just talking about the need for further action and a reminder to one another that good things happen, good things can come together with bipartisanship. We can actually approach this from a responsible, common sense, side-by-side approach to legislating if we're talking together. And that conversation that night really helped break the logjam on COVID relief. And then it propelled us into 2021 when that same group, plus another two, came together to write the largest infrastructure bill in our nation's history. And that bipartisan infrastructure bill, of course, is now law. And thank you. So that's in law now, and over the next 5 years, I promise you, it will bring sustained benefits to both rural and urban communities across our state. It's going to bring more and better roads, repairs to our some 140 structurally deficient bridges, new and improved ports and airports, a revitalized marine highway system. Yeah. We're also going to see opportunities, unprecedented opportunities in broadband and clean water, which we all acknowledge should be the basics of life in a 21st century, and bringing them to more Alaskans and to more villages. This bill is going to help us build out, it will help us build out our renewables and bring new technologies like microreactors to places beyond Eielson, which of course is the Air Force's first deployment site. And as we gain those benefits, we're going to be creating jobs. We will restore, we will grow our economy, we will improve Alaskans' quality of life, and we'll leave a healthier, more resilient, better developed, and yet still beautiful state for our children. So this infrastructure bill only became law just a few months ago, but it's already delivering real results. We're seeing those results to our state. More than 600 million, 608 million actually, has already been announced for Alaska. This is from the Port of Nome to the Denali Park Road, and there's a lot more to come. So to you all, we've got the law in place. Resources, federal resources are there. But I commend this legislative body for paying close attention to this law. And I shared with those of you on the House Labor and Commerce Committee a couple weeks ago, we were able to beam into your hearing, but we need your help to build Alaskans' capacity to apply for these grants. So as you're developing the budget, I urge you, keep these matching grant requirements in mind. You've probably heard, but I'll reinforce here, I'm hosting an infrastructure grant symposium in Anchorage. This is going to be Monday, the 11th of April. This is open and free to any Alaskan who is interested in visiting with agency officials to see what they have available. So we're really trying to make this kind of a one-stop shop for information. But I will share with you, I think that this law, this infrastructure law, is one of the most consequential measures that I have ever worked on. And I thank Senator Sullivan, Congressman Young for their support for it, but I really want to commend Congressman Young. He put aside the partisan pressure to oppose the bill in the House and really worked to round up the votes there on the House side. So I thank him for that. But there's more accomplishments for the state of Alaska, and I welcome the opportunity to share them with you or remind you about some of where we have been in this past year. Here in Southeast particularly, but really all around the state, we know how hard the tourism-based economy has been hit, and that's why it was so important that we secure a waiver from the Passenger Vessel Services Act last summer that allowed the first cruise ships to return to our ports since 2019. We made some headway there, and it was important. So we're looking forward, but I've already introduced legislation to make that waiver permanent. I think the strength of our economy, our state's economy, should not depend on decisions made by another country. And so putting this in place permanently is something that I'd like us to consider. So Canada's heard us on this message. Its ports, as you may see, are open, but we'll get another waiver if we need it. And right now, we're working to put an end to the CDC's unwarranted travel advisory for cruise ships, because that's still hanging over as just kind of a dark cloud there. So my message on this to those who are thinking about visiting our great state, it's pretty simple. The cruise industry is taking every precaution to ensure a safe trip and Alaska is ready to host you for your trip of a lifetime. And as we focus on restoring the tourism industry, we also have some opportunities to expand it, some fun ones. One is the Alaska Long Trail. This is an exciting project for any of you who get outdoors and hike and love to explore Alaska on the ground. But this would connect Seward to Fairbanks and create an iconic route in our state. So as we are focused on diversifying Alaska's economy, we're also diversifying our food supply. As you all know, Alaska still imports about 95% of our food, and the pandemic and supply chain breakdowns are the latest reminders of why we've got to change this. So I applaud all those who are working to take this on and making a difference. You've got great entrepreneurs out there, food banks, farmers, fishermen. You've got great examples here in Juneau with Barnacle Seafoods. You got Forage and Fowler. You got Myers Farm there in Bethel, Matsu Farm Co-op. There's a lot of energy going on with this, and it's exciting. I wrote and funded legislation that we call the Microgrants for Food Security Program, and this has already enabled the Alaska Division of Agriculture to fund 366 different projects in the state. So we're seeing, again, that translate onto the ground. We've got a farm bill that's on Congress's agenda for 2023. So I'm working on what we're calling the Arctic Ag Bill to do even more to help us be more food secure. So I'd appreciate your input on that. Another vital aspect of Alaska's future is with regard to our role in national defense. And we're all just glued to what we're seeing coming out of Russia and Ukraine, watching the news this morning. But we have witnessed the largest troop buildup in Europe since World War II. And as we know, the invasion has begun. What we had feared has begun. Russia is threatening not just Ukraine, though, but the international order and the norms that have prevailed for decades. So as of this morning, Nord Stream 2, that pipeline going in from Russia into Europe, has been halted. That's good, that's important. Sanctions are being imposed, that's absolutely necessary. And we're entering a new phase of this crisis. A full-scale invasion would lead to catastrophic loss of life, have massive implications for the security of Baltic states, for NATO, for the positioning of American forces around the world, and even for the Arctic and us in Alaska, given, of course, our proximity, our location directly to Russia's east. In the midst of that, and whether we are focused on Russia, China, North Korea, or other nations, we have to remember Alaska remains the most strategic place in the world. And military commanders know this, they know that value, and we need to work with them to fulfill it. When we completed the bed down of the F-35s and when we complete them at the KC-135s there at Eielson, Alaska will be home to more fifth-generation aircraft than anywhere else in the world, not just in the country, but in the world. This, think about this, ladies and gentlemen, this is such a complete 180 from where we were in 2005 when Eielson was threatened with brat closure. And I'm looking at Steve and I'm looking at Bart. You know full well, looking at Scott, you know where we were in 2005. Think about where we are now and what we are seeing. More fifth-generation fighters in this area. So it's really incredible, but it speaks to the geostrategic position that we occupy. I always get asked, how are we doing on icebreakers? Well, we are making good progress on icebreakers. We have now authorized 6 polar security cutters, fully funded 2, and will approve the purchase of long lead time materials for a 3rd in this budget cycle. So we are moving out in polar security cutters. Coast Guard. Coast Guard does so much for us in this state. And through the infrastructure bill, we're funding projects that the Coast Guard has sought for decades. And yet they just haven't been able to complete because we haven't been able to get those federal dollars to them. But this is going to include the Kodiak fuel pier, child care facilities, more housing. So I know that this makes you happy, Madam Speaker. But our Coast Guard is going to greatly benefit from this infrastructure bill. We've directed each military service to release an Arctic strategy. And we've just established the Ted Stevens Center for Arctic Security Studies in Anchorage. It will further the Department of Defense's focus on security cooperation in the high north. So these are real, tangible eyes on the Arctic that are happening right here in this state. These advances along with the radar expansion at Clear, the addition of new missiles for defense at Fort Greely, these are going to bring new service members to our state, along with many opportunities for civilian and support jobs. For our veterans, the VA recently opened a new community-based outpatient clinic, the C-Box is more often referred to. This was opened in Soldotna last December. We're soon going to have a clinic in Fairbanks and an expanded facility in the Mat-Su Valley. So we're taking care of our veterans as they should be. So the delegation has worked really hard to produce real results for Alaska as we support our military, but we still face challenges in a few key areas. And as excited our borough, we need to prioritize a swift resolution to the housing issue, just as we need to address the alarming rise in suicides among those who serve our country. I have continued to elevate mental and behavioral health at every opportunity. I recently introduced a measure to prevent the Coast Guard from automatically discharging those who would seek help. Think about the deterrent. This is a big issue for us. In Alaska, this is a big issue for us when we think about mental health, behavioral health, and how we provide for that broader health for our communities. So let's work on this one together. When it comes to resource development, core promise made to us at statehood, we have had a few notable wins in the midst of some uphill battles. I added a provision to the infrastructure bill to modernize the $18 billion loan guarantee for the Alaska gas line, making the current project eligible for it. I opened up the Department of Energy's loan guarantee program to states so that here in Alaska we can bundle some good projects, whether it's the McCushion geothermal project or whether it's the Thayer Creek project over in Angoon. But bundle them together to secure the capital to construct them, because we all know what a hindrance that has been. The entirety of my American Mineral Security Act is now law, including its permitting reforms. This is a big deal for us on the permitting reform, because as you know, we can do a lot of things, but if you can't get the permit, you can't get home. We've also worked to provide funding to help reduce our foreign mineral dependence. So we've got a lot of work that we have to do in that area. The Alaska Mental Health Trust land exchange is now effectively complete, allowing the harvest of 201 million board feet of Tongass timber to move forward. GMT2 is on track to add 30,000 barrels to taps each day. Hill Core is investing and reviving production in Prudhoe Bay. And I truly believe the Willow project will be approved this year. So I just need you to know, anytime I have a conversation with anybody in the White House, the subject of Willow comes up. I actually found out that the president has a new cat that he named Willow. This is a true story. So think about that. That name had to be in his head for some reason there. So we have had some wins, and yet the list of decisions that have gone against us seems longer by the day. And I'm not going to itemize it here. We all know what's happening in the 1002 area, the NPRA, Ambler, the Tongass, elsewhere. Laws are being ignored. Millions of acres are being taken off limits, and even projects that were already permitted are being stalled out by the Biden administration. Frankly, no administration should look to OPEC instead of Alaska for supply. And no administration should entertain a bad nuclear deal with Iran to help lower prices instead of looking to our own opportunities. And no administration should defend a Russian pipeline instead of refilling ours. The question that we got to ask is why would we reward the Russians and punish Americans? And that is just as simple as it comes down to. So that's what we face right now. That's what we're facing right now. It's a failure on policy, and I think it's the height of hypocrisy. But I think reality is on our side. There is no question that the resources that we have in Alaska are needed by our country. They're needed by the world. Just look at oil prices, $100 a barrel. We saw that 7 years ago, but we're about $100 a barrel right now. Just look at how Russia has leveraged Europe over natural gas. Look at the soaring global demand for minerals. So if there was ever a time for realism to prevail on resource development, it's now, folks. It's now. Every day, I remind the Biden administration of the immense benefits of Alaska production, energy and minerals alike, and every day I remind them that refusing to permit those activities can have harmful consequences. And I should add here that greater production of Alaska's resources would be good news, not bad, for our efforts to address climate change. Because we don't flare our gas, we re-inject it. Our production is cleaner and results in fewer emissions than most other places. So on climate policy, Congress has taken 3 major steps over the past 15 months. Between my Energy Act of 2020 and the infrastructure bill, we authorized and allocated more than $70 billion in new technologies. And the global phase down of the use of ultra-warming hydrofluorocarbons, where we have now committed to doing our part here in the United States. This will avoid up to ½ degree of projected warming. So we are making solid headway. So brings me to public safety now. Last summer, you know, victim service providers around the state, they were calling you, they were certainly calling me, because they were nearly shut down until we were able to direct some new resources to the Crime Victims Fund to keep their doors open. And yet, we know that that's not enough just to keep the doors open. We live with an epidemic of domestic violence and sexual assault in our state. And that's why I've been working with colleagues to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act, which has now a filibuster-proof majority in support of our bill. It is, thank you. This is important, this is significant. It includes my provisions to address teen dating violence. We named this after Brianna Moore. I know that many of you in this chamber have been visited by Bree's parents, Butch and Cindy Moore, who have been extraordinary advocates to this cause. And so we are focused on addressing teen dating violence in the law. We expand victims' access to medical forensics exams, and we improve access to care for all victims of violence. And I also worked hard on VAWA's tribal title, which includes a pilot program for a limited number of tribes to exercise concurrent jurisdiction with the state over certain domestic violence-related crimes. And this is a recognition that the tribes can be valuable partners that play a larger role in restoring public safety while reducing the burden on the state. I developed VAWA's tribal title in my role as Vice Chairman of the Indian Affairs Committee. This is a position that ensures that Alaska Native voices are heard and they're reflected in decisions being made across the federal level. And next on my list there is to remedy the 50-year injustice of the landless communities here in Southeast. And given its 157 medevacs over the past 8 years alone, know that I continue to fight for that life-saving road for King Cove. We do not give up on that initiative. One of the long-standing issues facing Alaska Native communities continues to be the contaminated lands that were conveyed to them by the federal government. It is well past time for federal agencies to take ownership and address the terrible consequences that those lands are inflicting on human health. So I commend Commissioner Bruni and his team for taking this on. We're going to be partners working with you on this important measure. We also have to protect our fisheries for generations to come. We're expecting another incredible return in Bristol Bay. That's great, but we know we need to have the workers. We've secured funding for the Pacific Salmon Treaty and for fisheries surveys. The recent fisheries disaster declarations bring some welcome relief, albeit way too late, but it is coming. But also the extra visas that the administration has made available for seasonal workers is going to be important. But we have to understand why some of our most iconic species, like salmon and crab, are in decline. Last fall, the delegation held a roundtable to hear from fishermen and scientists about what we know and what we don't know. And the delegation has since introduced legislation to establish a federal research task force to help us find that path forward. And while we're speaking about fisheries, I want to recognize the distinguished senator in the back, Senator Stevens, and the committee, and our speaker here as well, all those on the committee that have advanced resolutions calling for the Russian embargo on Alaskan seafood, calling on that to end. You're right. You're right. The United States should halt all seafood imports from Russia until they lift their ban on ours. It's just reciprocity. So Senator Sullivan and I have legislation to impose a reciprocal embargo on Russian imports. We're pushing for it to move on a standalone basis and as part of any Russia sanctions package that may move forward. Another major priority when I return to Washington next week will be to finalize the federal budget for the rest of fiscal year 2022. We've got to reach a final agreement so that everything that we've done, everything that we put in place with these appropriations bill, including the $230 million that I secured as congressionally directed spending, can come back to Alaska. So in case you haven't heard the term congressionally directed spending, CDS is the fancy new term for earmarks. Just full disclosure, these projects that I have requested are all listed on my website. They direct a very small portion of federal spending to make, I think, a real difference in the lives of Alaskans. You know, when you think about some of the things that make a difference for a small community, backup power for the community of Metlakatla. Fairbanks has been trying for years now to figure out how they can revitalize the downtown, but how you demolish and remediate the Polaris building there in Fairbanks, improvements for our earthquake early warning system. These are the types of matters that you will see on our list. So the final issues I want to raise, I'm getting to the end here, I promise, but it's what everybody's talking about at their dinner table. What are people talking about? High prices of everything, the cost of daily life, and workforce challenges. Alaskans are facing the highest inflation in 40 years. Everything costs more. Family budgets are stretched thin. Businesses, big and small, are struggling to find enough employees to keep their doors open. This is causing pain everywhere. We've got to address it. And so, how do you start? Where do you start? Well, the first step is you have to stop with what would be considered reckless spending. You have to reinvigorate domestic resource production, which can help us in Alaska boost and help make energy and manufactured goods more affordable. I think we also need to take a long look at the Federal Reserve and the impacts that its policies have had, because everything's fragile right now. We know that. And our first responsibility as policymakers is to make things better, not worse. So I want to share a very quick story. A couple weeks ago, I was down on the Kenai Peninsula, and it was the end of the day. I stopped by Odie's restaurant. It's a little restaurant there, and they make great cookies, by the way. But there had been a small group of folks to come together. I just wanted to talk to them about what are you feeling here in town? What are the impacts that you're seeing on prices and supply chain? And I heard just all over the bird. I heard about the cost of a culvert. Working on a project there for stream restoration. The cost of a culvert had gone from $150,000 to $400,000. We heard that smaller businesses were having to rebid every 10 days to keep up with the changing costs. How do you do anything with that? Heard multiple times, not just at Odie's, but that the restaurant had to reduce their hours, not because people were not coming in, but because they didn't have sufficient staff. And they had to keep their folks from just burning out. But one story that really stuck with me came from the owners of the local theater there. They'd just been struggling with workforce issues, just couldn't get the people that they need. And this had been going on for months at end, and it is exhausting, it is draining. And every day just seems so hard. And they shared that, one morning it's like, it's gonna be a better day. We got everybody who's supposed to be working. And then they find out that their shipment of plastic drinking straws was on a 3-month back order. And they're like, I just melted. It just tipped me over the edge. And you might think, well, wait a minute. Straws are a pretty minimal thing when you think about what is happening with empty shelves and all that's going on. But it's an experience that I think we can all relate to. Everybody's doing okay, until there's just that one more thing that's like, how am I going to make it through this? Just how are we going to make it through this? But what I didn't hear at Odie's, what I didn't hear was anybody that was willing to just give up, to say, this is just too hard. Every one of those small business owners said, no, I'm committed to my business. I'm committed to what I've built. I'm committed to the people who are still here for me. I'm committed to my community, and I'm committed to my state. And it was just such a good reminder to us as Alaskans that we go through some challenging times, but we do it together. And it's hard, but we're committed to our place. And Alaska is our place. Now, I don't pretend to have all the answers for every problem that arises. No one does. But I do think I have a good way to find solutions. And that is by working together, by working side by side so that we can actually get things done. Good governance, responsible governance. And I'm optimistic. I said in the beginning of this speech here, I'm optimistic. And I'm optimistic because of all the good things that I think the delegation has been able to deliver for Alaska, and because of the resolve, because of the resiliency of the Alaskan people. And the lesson that I take is that we will overcome, we will accomplish great things by working together instead of deepening our divisions. We can find ties that bind them and heal. So that's my hope, that's my governing prayer for 2022, that we'll wake up every morning, we're going to channel Ted Stevens and say, to hell with politics, we're going to seek common ground, we'll find it, and in doing so, do right by the state that we all love and the people that we serve. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you again.